Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Lifelong Learning and Discerning. Today's episode is titled Freedom to Be, Freedom to Breathe. So, I advocate a holistic approach to living, a holistic lifestyle that is ethical, pure, and purifying, as organic as possible, as close to garden-like conditions as possible, so that we can enter into harmony with nature and live according to the principles of natural law, the way it actually is, not as we imagine it to be, not as we want it to be, not as we hope it to be, not as we've heard it is, but as it actually is. And we can directly access this through observation, utilizing the senses, intellect, and intuition. When we begin to study life, seeking to see what actually is versus what is imagined and what is hearsay, we notice certain patterns. So for instance, if you study creatures apart from humanity, it's interesting that from what I've observed, humanity is the only species that has to pay to be alive. Think about all the bills that you have personally that you have to pay. You know, that you have to work any number of hours at any number of jobs in order to pay your bills. Most of us from the West, and I would argue that nowadays, unless you're living in a very remote tribal society, we are all Westerners. We are all the people of Rome now. We are all Romans. We are all living according to Western ways of understanding the world and moving through it. You know, we all started in the garden, the place where the sun rises, and now we are moving toward the end of a certain sequence of timed events in human evolution, in human development. And we are moving into the sunset of humanity. Does this mean the end of humanity? Not according to my studies, not according to what I've seen from prophecy, but we're going into a dark, we're either going into a dark period or we're coming out of a dark period. Now, connected to this is the idea of paying for everything. Many of us, we are in various forms of debt. We went into debt to pay for higher education, for college, so that we could then afford to have a certain lifestyle. And we took on these various debts as investments in our future. This was the way it was presented to many of us. Some of us that were a bit more wise and had more guidance may have avoided this and taken other paths to avoid those enmeshments in debt systems, especially the interest-bearing debt systems that seem to, the debt just grows and it grows and it grows. Like seeds planted in a very fertile soil with all the right conditions to overwhelm us. So many of us we pay bills on a monthly basis, half a dozen to a dozen bills, at least, that are regularly timed billing cycles, where we have to pay, say, if you own a house, you have to pay a mortgage. You have to pay various insurances on that. You have to pay property taxes. If you own a vehicle, you pay not only for that vehicle, and many people are doing installments to pay for that vehicle. They have to pay for car insurance, accident insurance. They have to pay for upkeep of this vehicle. They have to pay for, gas and oil, and, the upkeep is the maintenance, new parts, for cost of labor, etc. Occasionally as things break down, because things are built to obsolesce, to actually not have the full lifespan that they're capable of being built. Many things are capable of being built to last, but they're designed to break down more easily, so that we have to pay for various industries, service industries, and that we have to then desire to buy new products. And so we're also paying electrical, we're paying heat, so gas, we might be paying for water, we are paying health insurance, life insurance, we're paying just to eat food, we're paying for water, we're paying for any number of bills per month that are not recurring. They just pop up occasionally and that we have to invest in various ways. And it's quite overwhelming when you think about it. The average person, many people are working hourly jobs, and then they work overtime perhaps, or they have to work additional jobs to pay all of these bills. And then you've got a situation where then salaried workers have to put in many hours that are off the books, not off the books necessarily, but they are that are outside of the office environment. So for me, myself, for many years, I have been a salaried teacher, teaching secondary school, middle and high school level. So 13 to age 18 or 19 is the range generally that I've worked within. And you have your 30 to 40 hours of contact hours where you are in the classroom working with the students, engaged in lectures, small group instruction, etc. And then you've got many hours outside of the teaching, where you're doing where you are doing planning, lesson planning, which may be collaborating with other teachers or departments. Some of it is within the school day, some of it is outside of the school day. Then you're going to have your grading. You're going to be grading and preparing projects. You're going to be doing conferencing with parents. If you have a school situation where you've got a lot of students who have behavioral issues, perhaps you are on the phone calling, putting many hours into contacting parents and emailing parents in order to problem solve in advance or to deal with ongoing recurring problems with certain students, because many students don't have healthy parenting situations. And so teachers are spending a lot more time problem solving in advance or putting out brush fires or sometimes big issues over time. So the whole thing is that everybody is working a lot of hours. It's not just a 40-hour work week. We're typically seeing people work 60, 80 hours per week on one or more jobs in an hourly situation or beyond, an overtime situation, whether it's official overtime or unofficial overtime. I know that I worked situations that had hourly constraints upon them, and then I had overtime that was official, and then I had unofficial overtime where I was doing additional work to get, just so I had my assignments completed. And I know I'm not the only one who's dealt with these situations. So now we think about other costs to live, to be alive. When you are working these additional hours, this has long-term health ramifications. Even if you are eating a very healthy diet, as organic as possible, as close to the garden as possible, you're drinking enough water, you are juicing, you are eating lots of organic green salads, having green smoothies, but you're not getting enough sleep, you're not getting enough sunshine, you're not getting enough exercise. Maybe you live in an area that doesn't get a lot of sunlight during, maybe 3 to 5 months a year. Say you're in the northern latitudes, you're up in northern Europe, or you're in Canada, or you're in the northern extremes of the United States, or in the Northwest where you have a lot of rain and so many cloudy days. And then increasingly, we're having all these spray days that are gray days. And those days have an impact not just on our health through what we are breathing in and what we're absorbing through our skin perhaps, but on our happiness and our well-being. So we're not, and often when we're in these environments where we're spending a lot of time working, we don't have as much time with friends and family, and it leads to a long-term burnout situation. And many of us, we're looking forward to a 2-week vacation a year, or maybe a 2-week vacation and a couple 1-week vacations that we get to spend with friends and family. Maybe somebody has a yearly fishing trip or a yearly hiking trip, or a trip out of the country, or a trip to national parks within Western Europe or within North America or wherever it might be. And increasingly, we live in Western lifestyles all around the world, and we have this kind of model: the salaried position, the hourly position, the vacations, we live for the weekends. And what happens is it has a long-term health impact. Some people are eating so much refined sugar that it leads to diabetes, and then they have to take insulin, and then they have to, or people are eating so many processed foods that they become obese and then have all kinds of cardiovascular issues that go along with that. People go into long-term depression and then take pharmaceuticals, anti-anxiety pills, antidepressant type of medications. And these and those are synthetic inputs that are concocted in a laboratory. Many of the so-called foods we're eating, just because we can chew something, swallow something, and absorb something into our digestive tract, does not make it food. It does not make it nutrition. Many of these these food-like substances are unethically derived and processed, and they are impure synthetic inputs. They're dijalic inputs in the sense that they are synthetic. They are laboratory concocted. They are artificial inputs that then have a negative impact on our organic well-being. So they have costs. So those are other bills that we pay long term. Many people, they are trying to save time. They're working these long jobs, and then they eat convenience foods, fast foods, whatever, that taste good, feel good temporarily, but then have a long-term cost. And then they are paying for years to take care of their bodies, to get out of a cancer situation. And then they're taking chemotherapy drugs. They're taking radiation into their bodies that then maybe they get 5 years of life, and they call that surviving cancer, but it's not a cure. They're not cured. And then what happens is they go back to whatever inputs and outputs that organized the conditions for such unhealthy states of physical and emotional states of being to arise. So we have many costs to live in this dijalic realm. Many Christians would term this mystery Babylon, that we are all within this mesh, this network. It is an artificially constructed fabric, a network, a net that is threaded through us and around us, imprisoning us and enslaving us. And we imagine that we are free, but in fact, we are enslaved, not just financially, but energetically and spiritually. And then many people, I will just add this in, that many people, they believe that their religion provides them freedom, and then they're enslaved to scholars. They have to go to a scholar or a priest for intercession, for information on how do I behave in this situation. And they literally don't know how to use their critical thinking apparatus and their intuitive apparatus in order to figure things out directly from nature. They don't know how to read the outer and the inner signs. And they're further enmeshed into an enslavement. And then it's like they're paying various taxations. It's like not only all the different taxes and insurances and those insurances are forms of tax. So they're paying those tax, then they pay religious tax. They pay, like for in the Islamic context, we have 4.25%, I believe, on annual income. And then if you own a farm, it's the biblical 10% tithe or something thereabouts. And then if you're Shia, then you pay an additional khums tax. And then if you are a Christian, it's a 10% tax. And if you're a Mormon Christian, you pay the biblical tithe, plus you pay an additional amount to the church. And various religions have these various taxations. And then they have maybe a certain amount of time that people are required to volunteer or to share for dawah purposes or missionary purposes or whatever it might be that have long-term costs. Now, the thing is, so many of these things also bring a benefit, but it's very interesting that in the current context, we are very much in debt nonstop in so many different ways that it's quite overwhelming. And it's just interesting that when we compare ourselves to other species, the other species have various freedoms. Now, many species have been enslaved to us. The elephants, the horses, the donkeys, zoo animals. Many different creatures have dogs and cats, and some have kind of a symbiotic relationship with us, where both species have certain amounts of benefits, but it's just kind of interesting to think that, and then they're stuck in the Western system. And so when I say the Western system, I'm speaking about a broader Dajjalic mystery Babylon system. A spiritual Egypt is the way that some of the Christians had termed it, and some of the apocalyptic Jewish and apocalyptic Christian movements previously. And that's what we need to make Hijrah out of, are the various constraints, and we need to go back to nature as much as possible wherever we can. That's where off-grid movements and Hijrah movements are, prepping movements are related to these things. So let's just take a cost-benefit analysis and really add up the various costs just to be alive. And then what are the benefits of the things? It's very healthy to take some paper and pen and really map out all the different expenditures, and then take a holistic analysis. The various things that we spend our energy and our time on, we're spending on various media and entertainments. So just consider this and think about, how can I find freedom and remove myself from that which is costing me and it is interest laden in various ways. There are many ways of spending interest. And we're going to discuss that more soon, inshallah, but this is just to think about how we have to pay to breathe, how we have to pay to be, how we have to pay to be alive all across the world. Whether it's a flat world or a sphere or a pear-shaped, place, whatever it might be, it's very costly to live in this world. So let's just consider this and think about what are some solutions to our dilemma. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.